Hello, welcome back to Media Snack, live from New York.
Greetings from London.
Good. So we're in Q4 now.
Yeah, we are.
Busy time of year. Everybody's budget planning, getting ready for the next year. Probably can't wait for 2020 to be over. I know, you can see I need my lockdown haircut. As we prep for next year. So those of you in those media roles, in whether you're a regional, global media director, you know that this is an important time of year. You've probably already done a lot of budget setting, planning with the agency, starting to sign things off ready for Q1 and beyond. Today we're joined by a really special guest, which is Oliver Malletz, who's from Volkswagen. Massive company, big German auto company. They probably had a bit of a tough year, and he'll share us, what the category's been like. But if you know Oliver, he's been one of the most high-profile media directors around in the last 5-6 years. Recently last year shifted into a regional marketing leadership role. But we're going to interrogate him a little bit about that, but really about this, what we love talking about, which is the challenges of being a global media director.
Yeah.
I think that's it. So should we say hi to Oliver?
Bring him on. Hi, Oliver.
Hello, all. How are you?
Very good. So you're in Wolfsburg today?
Yes.
In the office. And we can just see Mr. Porsche behind you there.
Yeah, he's looking over my shoulder, making sure I don't mess anything up here. So
Good.
Quite right.
Good. Excellent. So, we've known you for a little while. In the media industry, you were very high profile global media director for a number of years for Volkswagen. And about a year ago, you shifted into a global marketing role. So you lead marketing for Europe, I should say. Talk about that transition before we get into talking about the media director stuff. What's the role that you're in now, and what's it been like this year? Because we know that automotive has been a challenging category, hasn't it?
Yeah, it is quite challenging. The marketing role that we're in now, the way we've structured this, it is very much marketing ROI focused. One of the challenges when you're at a global level is you kind of lose touch with what's happening in the market because you're focused on a lot of more internal, larger issues. So as we've regionalized our network, marketing has also regionalized, and we set up a regional team for Europe to essentially, and the mantra of my team and the main number one goal is maximize marketing ROI. So we've put a lot of strategic things in place. Now it's time to implement them and make sure that they're working. And especially as this industry is becoming much more D2C and moving away from the OEM wholesaler, dealer, retailer. It's starting to get much more into the DTC, and even with the online digital metrics, we need to look at those a lot more as if we're a DTC with consumers going into to dealers as they purchase a new car only once or twice.
Yeah.
And the average is 1.3. So people are really only going in. They're doing all of their research online. I say internally, and I've been saying it since I started. The sale today is made online. The deal is done in the dealership, right? The contract is closed. The deal is done in the dealership. That hasn't changed yet. But the selling of the brand, selling of the model, the selection of the features that a consumer wants, that's all done online now, which has a completely different approach. And we find more and more that consumers are smarter than the sale. They're coming in very, very well informed. And it poses challenges. So being so far away at global, the need for regionality and being able to say, hey, let's look at things from a DTC perspective. Even our agencies don't look at us. They think automotive, old school,
Yeah.
In New York, they think Detroit, right, for the most part, even though there aren't any really there. But it's not that old school anymore. It is very, very digital focused. The purchase path is very digital focused, and it's really about getting the internal structures to understand and the consumer's various paths to purchase, because there isn't just one. There's thousands for consumers. The reason we set this up is to allow us to focus a bit more on that.
Yeah. Has that meant that I can see that there could be two implications. I'm sure there's more when it comes to media. One is that the consumer journey has obviously changed, but has it compressed? Because people can do all of their own research. Are you finding quicker buying decisions being made compared to traditional?
I'm not sure that they're that much fast. I mean, digital's been around for a while, so it's a question of what's the reference base. If the reference base were the 90s, yes, right. But digital has been around for quite a while. So in the last 10 or 15 years, maybe it's compressed a little bit, but people do a lot of research. They still have their own needs. The reason for a purchase are still the same. My lease has ended, my car's too old, and I don't want to pay for repairs anymore. And I had an accident, or you're a completely new car owner, or you've just gotten a new job or a new baby or a life stage event. Those things are still happening. And the need for the car on the consumer end is still pretty much, in the US, I need it today. Can I pick one off the lot? In Europe, it's a little bit different. There's a lot of people that order cars and they'll wait 3 months for their exact car versus just taking what's on the lot. So it depends on the market. But I think overall, the life stage need on the consumer really hasn't changed. How they get there has changed a lot. But the life stage need, I think, is still there.
And Oliver, you're a little bit unique in that you're a media leader that has migrated into a broader kind of marketing role, and there aren't too many of those in the marketplace at the moment. What do you think you're going to kind of bring to the marketing discipline that you kind of learned from your kind of media discipline times? How are you going to infuse kind of the marketing thinking within the organization with some deep subject matter expertise around media?
To me, the common thread and somewhat the missing thread on the rest of marketing is the data-led approach. And when you think of marketing, I'm going to go old school. I'm going to go to 101 classes. It's the 4 or 5 Ps depending on who you're talking to. So it's not just the promotion bit; it's the pricing, it's the rest of that. And although that doesn't sit under my purvey, we have other teams here that do pricing. But they're having marketing sit within the sales organization. You bring all of those elements together, which we didn't have before. It was much more purely brand focused. And please don't get me wrong, brand plays an incredibly important part, but it needs to be the right balance in order to build a brand and move metal at the same time. But it's definitely being much more data focused. It's much more numbers focused. It's not just creative. At Volkswagen, we're predominantly a manufacturing, design, engineering, distribution, and sales company. It's not necessarily marketing. We've had terrific advertising, but advertising is only one element of marketing. It's not all of marketing. So in my group, we do all the rest of it except the creative bit. That's done in a different element. But what we do is we inform the creative. What do we need? Why do we need it? What does it need to show? What works? What doesn't work? Those kinds of things. Because within our purview, we also have things like marketing ROI. Wouldn't be a surprise. Market mix modeling. With those tools today, we can assess one creative campaign versus another. And see which ones are working and why. We can dive a little deeper into why. Not that it's received sometimes with a grain of salt, creative. If you've ever been involved in the creative development process,
Yeah.
it's not like a media plan development process. It's different, but it's starting to get there because you're looking at more and more data and there's more and more understanding of what's working and what's not. And in digital environment, you know fairly immediately what's working and what's not. And the whole notion of this DCO, dynamic content optimization. A lot of the creative is just make sure I have the assets, and we'll play around with what the right words are and what the right texts are to see what works best, and I can test that very, very quickly. So that's been a big change.
How do you mentioned it just now, but it's really interesting in the automotive category. It has a long history of big advertising, brand-led advertising historically. Have you found, has the category shifted away to more short-term communication rather than the long-term brand building, or just shifted the way that that's done? Is there still a big role for investment in the brand?
There is. And unfortunately, with budgets going down, especially production budgets, it makes it more and more difficult to do. But we have a big initiative underway here to make sure that our tactical, our offer-based advertising also delivers on the brand. And whether you call it practical or branding tactical, there's so many different words that are there. But it shouldn't be, in the U.S. you see the arms flailing at dealerships to attract attention, right? That does work, but that doesn't necessarily mean that the TV advertising needs to reflect that. It does need to carry a very strong, it has a responsibility from an ROI perspective to carry a strong brand message, and at minimum, not detract from the brand message. So we're seeing a lot more of that. At Volkswagen, we're historically product driven, right? So we do product driven advertising. So so the product carries our brand, and we're getting we're exploring ways that we can actually elevate that, but still use the same content for tactical purposes. So it's been a bit of a balance, but branding still plays an incredible role. People still select a brand. It's either in your consideration set or it's not in your consideration set, or we have to find ways. I often refer to what I call a snake that swallowed an elephant chart, right? Because at one end of the chart, you've got a consumer's initial mindset, zero consideration, whatever, just top of mind. These are the cars I'm thinking about buying. Personal experience, past experience, others' experience, what advertising, all the things that build that up. And then they go through their purchase path, right? And they use multiple touch points. They use our websites, they use dealer websites, they use third-party auto contextuals, they use YouTube, they use Facebook, they use all kinds of different friends and family. And they end up with a purchase set, which might be different than their initial ingoing set, but after they've done their research, they may have 2 or 3 cars that they say, okay, I like those. And we have an opportunity to get on that set when we're in the belly of the snake, if you will, as the consumers bounce between all the different touch points. We have an opportunity to get on that purchase consideration set, and then ultimately to hand off to a dealer, or as we're getting more and more into online selling.
Yeah.
Very good. So, I'm sure we'll come back to your current role perhaps towards the back end of the conversation, but I want to just take you back to your previous role at Volkswagen, and you were the global media director, I think, for about 6 years, weren't you, before you moved into the European marketing role? And if the trade press is to believe, you were responsible for a mammoth budget in excess of 2 billion euros. So that was a massive.
If the trade press is to believe,
Right. Okay. But recorded. Okay. So whatever it was an enormous amount of money, and that
it was a massive team effort here. It was a massive team effort.
I'm sure. But I'm curious as to how did that role evolve over the 5 or 6 years that you kind of managed it? Media has gone through an enormous amount of change. It's higher on the corporate agenda than it's ever been. We talk now about media being a lever for growth rather than just being a cost. And you lived through that entire evolution. within the company, how did the media role, the media discipline, grow and evolve, under your supervision?
Yeah, it's a good question, and it's been a very good and challenging and fun challenge. Before I came on board, the role didn't exist, and after I left, it doesn't exist now. So that's good or bad. But when I was brought on, it started off as two ends of the spectrum. One, communication strategy, moving away from what we would call launch and leave. We launch a car because we look at things from an OEM perspective. We told everybody about our new car in January, and we hope the people that are looking for a car in October, November remember. So moving away from that and really balancing the OEM perspective. So we have a world premiere, we have pre-sales, we have different launch, and then we have sustain, but also bringing in the consumer perspective of anywhere from awareness to familiarity all the way down to experiencing the car. And we blended those two together to call what we call consumer moments planning. So it's a mixture of both. So that was the comm strategy bit on one side, so that we're better at launching vehicles and maintaining awareness of vehicles. And then on the other side, an agency pitch. Actually, when I first started, an agency pitch was already underway for the group. That pitch was already there, and at that point in time, Volkswagen had already said we're not moving from the agency we were with, but yet the rest of the group, Audi, Skoda, and some of the others were interested in leaving. So we do things as a group. So as a group, they pitched. So I had the opportunity to understand and learn the other brands relatively quickly, and what the contractual bits are. So good or bad, first week on the job, I'm looking at contracts. It was good. And but the good thing is we saw a bunch of agencies, and we knew that Volkswagen brand itself would pitch 3 years later, and which we did. So we ended up pitching. But over the time between when I started and when I left, the role became incredibly multifaceted. I mean, we were dealing things, not just the comm strategy and agency steering, but traditional media, digital media. We started getting into the performance bit. Brand safety is becoming a much more. Fraud is becoming an issue. The creative, because marrying media with the creative, right message, right moment, what we've been talking about for 30 odd years is becoming more to the forefront. ROI is a big project. GDPR is a massive project when you understand the fines that a company has to go through without that. And of course, reporting, the perennial pet peeve, getting good reporting, because if you can't measure it, track it, and report it, you can't steer it. So it's become a very, very multifaceted role that gets difficult for one position to manage all of. I can talk at length on all of the things in all of those in those areas, but again, it goes back to what I said earlier. You find yourself focusing more and more on those bigger issues and less on what's actually happening in the market. In a global role, you're fairly removed from the market, which is why we set up these regional hubs to get closer to the markets. And now that we have the strategic bits all more or less in play, not that everything's any done, because it's constantly evolving and constantly growing. That's one of the great things about this business. But that we're not just able to share some of those best practices and learnings and strategies and guidelines, but actually implement the guidelines and make those guidelines much more locally relevant. Because I've been doing global, regional, and central for years, and it's always about finding that right balance for your company on how decentralized to how centralized you are. And at least in my experience, the best answers have always been somewhere in the middle, somewhat of a hybrid.
And how as a media leader within that spectrum, as a business kind of moves from either decentralized or centralized or somewhere in the middle, how do you maintain a sense of kind of influence? I mean, we speak to a lot of media directors who struggle to get traction internally, and they become administrative roles often. Whereas the real influence, the real power is providing, thought leadership, best practice guidelines, being able to infuse interesting local ideas with global principles, etc. How did you find that within Volkswagen? How were you able to maintain traction and influence at a regional and local level to impact media delivery?
Yeah, it's a good question, and my immediate answer is become a media planner. Go back to your media planner days, and by that I mean know your audience. If I'm talking to senior management, it's a different presentation than if I'm talking to finance, than if I'm talking to a local market, than if I'm talking to an agency. And it could be the same topic. I'll have to revise the presentation, not massively, but at least the tone of it and the core message going across. You have to manage it to that. I can't talk in super detail to a board or a board member because I'll lose them in minutes. I have to, and I jokingly say when I talk to my team, where this is a board presentation, it's write it as if you've met somebody at a bar and you're trying to explain to them what you do and you want them to understand it. Because it's they're engineers, they're finance, they have a different mindset. They don't know what we do, and unfortunately, in our industry, we talk in a lot of jargon. So you have to turn that jargon into marketing speak. And I do a lot in marketing questions. I mean, when I set up my team, in order to explain to upper management, I could go through all the stuff, but I could say, look, here are the 12 marketing questions that we answer, because they can think in those terms. Are we investing enough money to reach the business goals that we have? And how do we know that, right? Is this particular model, does it have the right awareness, the right investment? So if you speak to them in those terms, then they understand it. It's just being able to, and as a media planner, you grow up doing that, right? You identify different audiences and what are the right messages for those audiences and the right channels for those audiences. It's really just doing that. I mean, I know I'm oversimplifying, but it's the same core, right?
We love that because we've been raging this mini campaign to simplify media because, like you, we recognise that the complexity allows people to, pretend sometimes, and people's job sometimes becomes, riddled with complexity, and the danger in a media role is that you become siloed, don't you? Because you can't communicate to the rest of the business if it looks like a complex thing.
Yes.
I love your idea. Not only to champion simplicity, but the idea that a really successful media director has to think like a planner. And we find it's very easy in that media director role to get a bit, because your attention is being spread over lots of these other adjacent functions and your time is being spread thin, and we've talked about that quite a lot, it can feel sometimes very like an operational or tactical role. You said it quite casually earlier, but it's really important, and I want to kind of just quickly come back to it, is that you referred to your consumer moments planning. And we love that stuff, right? Because we think that certainly when it comes to media or all kind of marketing communications, identifying those moments leads you down a really interesting path in media, because you start to look at the opportunities to connect with people in meaningful ways at the moments that matter, right? With the right message, is exactly as it should be, as we've been talking about for years and years. The media function or the media operation in many organizations, and some media directors complain about this, is that it's shifted from that. I will pay the price for the right moment to the right, to then just buying cheap reach. Did you find pressure? Has there ever been pressure where you thought, we've just got to buy cheap and cheaper, maybe not in Volkswagen or any other business, but how do you protect that moments when it comes to media? Because it costs more in theory, right, to buy premium and moments that matter.
Yeah, and yes, it does. And I think a bit of that answer is understanding what's the objective of that particular investment. I'll simplify it that way. If I have an investment that I'm launching a new car and I really just want somebody to see it and understand it, see the design, see the features, just really get a high level seeing and understanding. I'm not trying to drive them to a lead. I want a larger reach, right? So we're now shifting to our mass media is truly truly mass. Yes, for our creative purposes, we need to identify an audience and speak to that audience. We do need that because we need a certain tonality and so on and so forth. But for the mass media, it should be mass. So adults 18 plus or whatever it might be. I got cheaper media just by doing that because I'm not buying a specific target. And by the way, it's not like when somebody walks into our dealers and say, "Oh, I'm sorry, you're not in our target group. We're not going to sell you a car." That doesn't work that way. People within they're just cores, they're indices, right? There's more propensity towards this target, therefore we'll talk to them. But a broad swath of people come in, so it's much more broad. So we've reduced costs that way. But if it's an upper funnel KPI, then I want awareness and I want engagement, and I'm willing to pay for awareness and engagement. If it's a lower funnel KPI and I just want leads and quality leads, yeah, then I might go for the lowest quality. And I'm a big fan in my agency. We'll probably ad nauseum. I only care about 2 KPIs in the digital world: number ofs and cost pers. And I want one to go up and the other one to go down. It's really that simple. It's very complicated in the implementation, yes, but it's really simple. Give me more visits, more configurations, more leads, and lower my cost per each one of those. That's quite simple. And that's where it depends, again, on what you're trying to achieve. I'll pay more for the awareness bit, premium positioning in the right places. It's also representation of our brand. You know, if we want to be cheap, I'll be in cheap locations. If we want to be high end, I'll be in high end. If I want to be top of volume, which is where we sort of see ourselves, then I need to be in somewhat slightly more premium position. And it's different for an awareness campaign, a KPI versus I'll buy affiliate marketing and get good leads as long as they're quality leads.
Yeah.
But I'm not going to do that for my brand message.
Yeah. I just want to explore a little bit about the relationship that you have with your kind of media agency partners. So you talked a little bit about the review that you ran in, I think it was 2016. You know, the big year of media pitches. People talked about it being Media Palooza in that year. And at the time, obviously, securing improved media pricing savings was a significant part of every pitch that went on that year. And now you talk about the role of data in helping influence media decisions, linking business outputs to some form of kind of media input. What is the role now? How have you seen the role of your media agencies evolve in the 4 or 5 years, perhaps since that pitch that you oversaw?
Yeah, they're in quite frankly a bit of a tough spot, and we have these conversations all the time because we have a very large procurement department that's worried about exactly the first part of what you said: lower my costs, get me lower media costs, and that's a good thing. And the first years I was here, and the good thing is that I was here when the first pitch started, but we weren't really the brand wasn't really in the pitch. We could talk to the procurement people and start to get them that understanding. Low cost is okay, but if I keep getting 10% cost reduction every year, at some point, mathematically, I'm going to be paying 1 penny for what I used to pay $1, right? So it's not realistic, right? And we spend a lot of time understanding the definition of savings. Savings is not was perceived as I can reduce my budget. If I spent 10 million and you saved me $1 million, I only need to spend 9 now. It took me a long time to get them to understand. No, it's $1 million inefficiencies. So I try not to use the word savings because it means cash to the bottom line, and I try to use the word efficiencies because it could mean, again, more of or lower cost per. So it could mean, and getting through that is fine, and then we set targets for that. Percent targets by channel. We're not yet with procurement on, for my awareness, I want this savings, and for my lower funnel, I want this savings. I think that might go a step too far in terms of being, complicating things. But the good thing is we have a definition there, so the agency has to deliver their numbers. We measure that regularly, and it's audited by third parties, so that's good. And I'm quite happy that that's a separate group, and it's actually at the group level because every brand has it. So I'm happy I can farm that out to someone else, and I can focus on give me quality bits as we go along. And quite frankly, the marketing managers locally are the ones that are actually saying, is it this position or that position with the buy? And by
Yeah.
extension, our media agencies locally.
Mm.
So, I'm in the position of let the procurement deal with that, and we'll just steer them in a good direction. And of course, we work very, very closely with them. But I don't have, that's not part of my day to day. It's
Yeah.
every 6 months I see a report and I'm either happy with it or I'm not.
Oliver, I mean, I want to just wrap up. As we wrap up, I want to just question you a little bit on the your experiences of a pitch, because we know the Volkswagen Group pitch was a big undertaking. It was quite well known at the time as being, it was a big process that you were looking at there. But just before I ask you that, I just wanted to, quickly recap, because I think some of the things that you're saying, or I think everything that you're saying, is really useful for media directors to hear, because I think there's lots of things that naturally, the way that you think in a very kind of structured way and simplifying the role, I think there's lots of language people want to pour over there, and I'm busy kind of scribbling things down. I'm learning like new phrases and ways of describing things in much easier language than we've used historically. I think that's really helpful, and also I think the message that you set is probably very reassuring for agencies as well. I think your narrative is probably very encouraging, and I'm sure you have a good productive relationship where you have your agency relationships. Because it's this very kind of pragmatic and business-focused approach. You're not someone who's in danger of overcomplicating the media function or the marketing function. So I think really appreciate that. So I just want to say thank you, because there's some really clear messages coming out of this conversation that I'm definitely going to be going back and referring to. So just before we wrap up, then just tell us about that. Tell us about that monster of a pitch. So what was that like? Because it went on a little while, and it covered, as you say, like lots of the different brands, and I think it was well known that there were lots of stakeholders involved. So, without giving us the gruesome details from internal, what was that like? Because, we know that they're difficult. They're difficult to run global pitches, multi-divisional, multi-stakeholder pitches. What was your experience, and what can we learn?
Yeah, I mean, it was an experience for me, because I had been on the agency side for years on the other end of the table, getting the brief and trying to pitch on the other side, and now I have an opportunity to see on this side of the table, and I had a lot of empathy for the people that were presenting to me, because I'm sure they didn't get up at 9 o'clock that morning after a good night's sleep and come present. I'm convinced of that. But it was a very complex, because again, we had multiple brands, multiple countries. And we didn't look at it as, at least we didn't brief it as a pure media pitch. We briefed it at a holding company level deliberately. So we didn't, go out to the PhDs, the MediaCom. We went at an Omnicom, we went at an IPG, went at WPD level, specifically to see a broader spectrum of what the capabilities were, hoping that they would respond in that way. So it was multifaceted, because of multiple brands, multiple countries, which by default means different needs, because different needs in different countries. But we had a good outside partner to help us with the day-to-day, because it can be a huge time suck internally if you're trying to manage that internally. Yeah. So we had a good partner with that really worked with each brand to make sure that we knew each brand was required to write a brief on what you want. My brief was simple yet complex. The headline brief was help us build a brand and sell more cars, because that's what we're hiring an agency to do, right? And then, of course, it was much more detailed below that, but the overarching theme was build brands, sell cars. It's not rocket science in that regard. But it was, of course, give them a while to get to a clear briefing, and what did we actually want? Because again, media wasn't a function. It really wasn't a part of the discussion. It was, yeah, we'll do whatever somebody else says. It's just media. It's just numbers. It's just costs, and reduce them, right? It wasn't build a brand, sell more cars. It was reduce costs. So switching that shift was a bit of a challenge. And then I found it very, very interesting being on the other side.
Just as it was getting really interesting. On the other side, here we go.
Necessarily adhered to. And, when I was on the pitch side, it was always focus on the business, focus on the client. Don't talk about yourself too much. Capabilities meeting, okay, who you are, what you do, fine. But once you're past that, stop talking about yourself and focus on how you can help me solve my problem. In my case, build a brand and sell cars. So that was one. It was, on the personal side, it was also, you could tell, because we wanted an integrated approach, that in some cases, you had the sense that they just met each other in the lobby downstairs for the first time. The people that are coming to present, and you can tell. I mean, you can't fake that. You can tell, and the people that worked together for weeks, you can tell because the chemistry was there. They would finish each other's sentences. They knew what was coming. You could quickly change the order and bounce around because they knew. So that was one. We had them really focus a lot on data-led approach, which really wasn't a topic of conversation before that. And an area where I probably wish I would have had pushed a little bit harder for was reporting. Again, if you can't measure it, track it, and report it on a good 21st century basis, then you can't really do it. And I mean that at the local level, at the regional level, or at a global level. So those are, that reporting right now is my pet peeve of the last 6 months. Give me a report that I can actually use to steer or maximize ROI, because that's my role now. So now give it to me real. I know I've been talking about it, but now I really want it. And it's been a bit of a shift to get them to go to that, to get to that direction. And even the creative has to be data led today. So.
Well, I'm sure the agency are listening. There we go. Wait for Monday morning.
And to me, the fundamental thing is if you understand the consumer's path to purchase and understand what touch points they need along that path, you've solved half the problem.
Very good.
Really good. Listen, there's a clear message here. We lost your audio for a little bit there, Oliver, unfortunately, but I think we got the story, because we lost you for a second. There's a really clear message in here, which I love. As I say, I'm going to go back and watch this again this afternoon. Just in understanding the simple things that make a difference. I think as an industry, we're so guilty of overcomplicating everything. Brilliant. Thank you so much.
Who was it that said it? If I had more time, I'd write a shorter letter.
Yeah, well, apparently Winston Churchill, and somebody else has said it was somebody else. That's the thing, it takes time, and I love the idea you have to think like a planner, because you just really got to think about your customer, not think about necessarily just start with an optimization or a reach target or a cost saving target. You have to start with the customer. Brilliant. Listen, thank you so much for sharing with us. Wish you well.
Thank you.
Great weekend.
Thank you
for having me.
Hopefully we'll see you back in New York soon at some point.
Thank you. That's
good. Excellent. So I'm sorry.
Really good.
Issues there. It's kind of weird one. We're normally okay with that, but there's a bit of a lag there, unfortunately. But I hope you got something out of that.
I did,
definitely. I really like that.
Yeah, me too.
You made me think, oh God, I wish you were my client. That'd be really good. If I was on the agency side, it's exactly the kind of person I want to work with.
I love those kind of marketing questions when you're speaking to the stakeholders internally. Just reverse it. Answer the marketing questions that they're having to deal with every time, but through a media lens. That's just really simple. Brilliant.
Yeah, love that.
Brilliant.
Okay. I'm sure there's more to come on that kind of stuff, and it deserves another episode or a blog post. We can start exploring it further. Anyway, that's it for this week. Thank you very much for watching Media Snack. We're live every Friday, 11 a.m. Eastern. Subscribe to be updated with future episodes, and we'll see you again next week with an excellent guest.
Bye for now.